Welcome to the Tenkara Angler Level Line Podcast. My name's Mike Agnetta, and we've got what I think is a pretty interesting show today. We're going to cover some Tenkara current events, play the Overrated Underrated game, do an extended talk about Tenkara lines, and then wrap it up with a little Tenkara Angler-related housekeeping. And joining me on today's panel is Anthony Naples. How you doing, Anthony? Good to see you.
You too.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Smith.
Hello. Good to see everybody. Coming
Absolutely.
to you from the first time within the new van. So this is a watershed moment in Tenkara angler history.
The adventure van. You took my thing from our draft the last podcast we had, and you actually made it happen.
Yeah, I actually did. I flipped it, I think, within days, and I sent 1,000 friends that I had to your house for dinner.
Yeah,
that night, which didn't go over too well.
No, they weren't very happy with what we had to serve. Not at all. And then last but not least, we've got the newest member of the Tenkara Angler team, our international editor, Bill Robichaux. How you doing, Bill?
Hi, Mike. I wish I could say I'm from an exotic location, but no, I'm home in the Wisconsin driftless area. Great to be here.
To some people, that might be exotic. I don't know. Well, since it's your first time recording with us, would you mind giving our listeners, just a brief introduction to yourself?
Yeah, I'm born, raised in Wisconsin. I'm a conservation biologist profession. My first love was birds of prey, and there's one of my red-tailed hawk paintings behind me. But then I got into other things. My career has mostly been in Southeast Asia, on wildlife conservation in Southeast Asia. And so the part of my work, I've just done a lot of traveling here and around other places. And I was actually living in Southeast Asia in Laos for about 10 years, and I got a chance. I finally figured out, I was living and working there, and I figured out how to come back home to Wisconsin and work here or live here and continue to work there. And I got back home, and I thought, all right, I started to learn that there were trout in the driftless area. I didn't really know that. I've been gone so long, and I grew up fishing, for pike and bass and lakes. And so I still have my dad's old fly reel, and I got out his old reel and a rod, and I did some fly fishing a bit as a kid, but I didn't, my dad didn't really mentor me in that. So I started practicing. I took a couple of classes like at Orbis and casting, and then I picked up my local weekly Madison, Wisconsin newspaper right at this time. And there's an article about this character named Matt Smith and this thing called Tenkara. I didn't know what the hell it was, but I read that and I said, okay, I'm putting all my chips in the middle of the table on this. This sounds a much better re-entry to trout fishing. So there was still an Orvis store in Madison, and I went down there. I said, do you have any Tenkara gear? And they said, yeah, we have one Tenkara USA Sato left on our rack, and I bought that and never looked back. So I have Matt to thank for that. Was about 2018 or so. Was that when that article came out, Matt? So,
but yeah, I think it was maybe 2017-ish. It was sometime in that period. Unfortunately, it was towards the end of the company's
that's all right. Just in time
lifespan, but.
So, and I'm really happy to be here. For all of you listening, I'm just saying, Tenkara Angler is great. Mike is a very cool guy, and Matt, and I'm getting to know Anthony, and I'm so down with Amanda Hoffner because our passions are the same thing, small stream fishing for native brook trout. So I love being part of this group, and I'm so grateful for the chance to try to contribute a little bit.
Oh, that's awesome. And we're happy to have you. I mean, the articles that you've brought to the website and the magazine have been, they've been really appreciated because you've kind of expanded the boundaries in your reporting or your article, whatever you want to call them, your write-ups, beyond just, the United States. I mean, we just actually, by the time this goes live, the article will probably been up for maybe 2 weeks now. But you just recently wrote an article about, an experience you had Tenkara fishing in Austria, which was really cool. So something that I know I don't get to try out it very often, put it that way.
Yeah. And I am a writer. I've been writing for a long time. I'm basically spending this winter writing a book on some conservation work in Southeast Asia. Yeah, and I also have the luxury of somebody I'm very close to, lives in Switzerland, right up in the Swiss Alps, near the source of the Rhine River, amongst some really beautiful fishing. So, as I said, it's even better than a woman with a bass boat, So,
Well, too cool. Well, like I said, welcome to the team. Obviously, you've been on the team for a little bit, and welcome to the podcast. So, let's get into some current events. We actually, for those that are regular listeners, you've probably noticed we took about a month off from doing our podcast. We've had them spaced out, every month, but we kind of took the last month off. And there's been a lot of things that have been going on in the Tenkara community and just at the fishing world at large that I thought maybe we'd kind of run through and talk about real quick, because we didn't obviously do it last month. So the first one, which was really cool, and it's a great, kind of milestone for the sport as a whole, is Tenkara USA celebrated their 15-year anniversary last week. I think it was last week. And it's really cool because they were basically the brand. Daniel Gallardo, started that company, was the brand that kind of popularized and introduced, if you will, Tenkara outside of Japan. So I just think it's a really cool milestone for, the sport as a whole. In the beginning, there was a lot of talk, is Tenkara a fad or whatever, but 15 years in, we're still here, and it's a really cool thing. I mean, I know a lot of you guys have been doing it for, quite some time. I don't know if you wanted to, share any thoughts on the 15 years. Maybe Bill, you actually already kind of did. You kind of mentioned how you got into it and, that sort of thing. But, Anthony and Matt, I don't know if you have any memories or anything like that you wanted to touch on, from the first 15 years of Tenkara.
So let's see, I got a prop here, some show and tell. So here's the Tenkara USA Ebisu, my first Tenkara rod. This was the 6.4. I guess they made a 5.5 version, I think, as well. So that was my first Tenkara rod. And I had started a blog in 2009. And so I had no business starting a fishing blog, but I did anyway. And so I would just be online trying to find stuff to talk about. I'd be searching the interwebs and everything. And I was probably on I don't even remember what website it was now. And there was that ad for Tenkara USA. Mike, you probably remember, it was this guy, and I don't know if anyone knows who he was. And he had like a fedora on, and he's kind of walking up the river, and he's got a line curled up in his hand, and he's holding the rod and the line. Do you remember that picture?
Yeah, I think I do.
Yeah. So I saw that picture, and I'm like, what the heck is this? So I went to the website and I was in a different financial position back then. So it was like hard to just I'm going to buy a rod, So I just kind of watched it for a while, and then there must have been a sale. So I finally bought one. I was going to Colorado. So, and this is probably a story a lot of people have. I was thinking I'd been fly fishing for a long time at that point. And I thought that it would be great for hiking. We're going to Colorado, a family trip. The kids were real little, 2 and 4 or something like that. So anytime we went on hikes, I thought I could throw this in the pack, and when we take a break, I could fish. That was kind of the plan. But it was funny. So before I got to Colorado, I managed to get the tip stuck in an extended position. And I tried for the life of me to get it down. I tried all sorts of safe ways, and I started trying more dangerous ways. Anyway, I couldn't get it down. So I got this thing in my backpack. Now it won't go all the way down into my backpack, so it's sticking up, and that the first section is sticking up, and it looks like an antenna. So people kept stopping me on the trail. They thought I was a biologist on the trail of, some animals or something, They thought I was catching wildlife. But no, it's just a Tenkara rod. So
all you got to do, and they come by and they look funny at you, just be like, careful, my ratings tell me there's Sasquatch pretty close by.
Right. So that was kind of my first rod. And long story short, I thought it would just be something I would mess with now and again.
Sure.
And it just, in Pennsylvania with the size streams we have and everything, it just worked, I just started catching more and more fish, and more fish than I was catching with my Western gear. Not that that's, has to be the metric, but I was catching a lot of fish, and it just kind of took over. That was kind of what happened. And it was also the time, I don't know, to put it in a little bit of context, it was kind of fly rods and lines, the prices were exploding at this time. You know,
Oh yeah, sure.
like shark lines that are like $120 for a fly line or whatever, you know. So we're getting all and then the Helios rods, and I mean, not to put that stuff down, but things were getting really, these high end, you know, rods were getting super pricey. And so you get this Tenkara rod that was a little more than these high end fly lines, you know, were, you know. So that was kind of cool, you know. It just so you get, you know, so that was kind of the context. So I thought it was cool at that time to step. It was kind of like, for me, it was like a punk rock thing too, like going back a little bit, you know, like we've got,
sure.
like, you know,
You're zigging when everybody else is zagging, right? I get it.
Fly fishing was becoming like prog rock, you know, and so Tenkara was kind of like a cool, like, you know, it was like the Ramones of fly fishing. So that was
even though fly fishers probably compare us to like Kenny G or something like that now.
Yeah, which I never really understood, you know.
I don't either.
You know, because like what's cool, what's like more manly, like to go out with a stick and a string and catch your dinner, you know, if that's what you're doing, if surviving. Like, I think that's pretty cool, you know, that you can go out. And I don't have to remember this, Mike, not a bit of Tenkara history that newer folks might not remember. There was a story, and it was not 2009, but a little bit after that, and maybe an Outside magazine, GQ, I don't know what magazine it was in, and it listed Tenkara among the manliest hobbies.
I actually don't remember that.
That's awesome.
I'll have to see if I can dig that up, because I made like a little video about it and posted it, you know. Yeah, I can't remember what magazine it was, which was funny because, yeah, as we know, that's not what most people are saying. So I thought it was kind of funny, but yeah. So and just to wrap it up real quick, the cool thing about Tenkara USA, and a lot of people can probably attest to this, is like, I don't know of any other company that made it so much about the consumer and the customers.
Right.
Like Daniel made it a family. You know, I was just some guy he didn't know. I emailed him, hey, you know, like, could I do some artwork for, you know, the event you have coming up? Sure. And he let me, you know, I did then 3 or 4 posters for their, you know, the Tenkara gatherings they did, and t-shirt work. You know, I worked on his magazine with them and on some advertising with them. And I was just, you know, some guy I didn't know, but it was just so cool that, you know, the forum on the website was kind of a gathering place where a lot of us met. You know, it was just a really cool thing. And this was kind of pre-Facebook and stuff, everything too. I don't know when Facebook started exactly, but, you know, I know like the forum was very active at Tenkara USA, and a lot of people met around that. And anyway, it was just such a cool thing, and it changed my life completely. Like I don't know what I would be doing if it hadn't entered my life. You know, like my life since Tenkara has been so completely different. You know, starting a company for a while, running a company, selling Tenkara gear and stuff, and you know, getting involved with you guys doing this stuff. I mean, yeah. So for me, it was like not to oversell, but pretty life changing. You know. So.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with that. What about you, Matt? I mean, you definitely came in, and you went, you know, you became a brand, you know, yourself too. So that's got to be quite an interesting journey. What's your, you know, what are your thoughts on 15 years of Tenkara?
So let me back up and say that I came in, I was introduced to Tenkara in like 2012-ish, maybe 2013-ish by Mike Lutz, who we ended up partnering with and doing Badger Tenkara. And as Anthony said, you know, like I had no business starting a fishing blog was his quote. Mike and I really had no business starting a Tenkara fly fishing company either. We were just really passionate about Tenkara and wanted to spread it around as much as we could. And, you know, we originally, our original idea for the name of the company was Access Tenkara, because that's what we wanted it to be about. But in regards to Tenkara USA, I think they did a lot of good with grabbing the initial attention. But there was a little bit of a barrier with the exoticness of it as it was being presented. So I think that was kind of our angle, was to try to drop some of that mystery. And, you know, and I don't want to say, you know, like we were never in any position to be a real threat to to Tenkara USA, if I may add that Daniel, I'm really rambling here, but Daniel really, if there is a Tenkara Hall of Fame, he's got to be one of the primary figures that it covers. His passion for bringing Tenkara to the U.S. Is what sparked everything that followed. There were instances of it trickling over, I think, prior to Daniel, but he was the one that really got the fire going and kept it going, and so very thankful to him, because as Anthony pointed out, Tenkara's really been kind of a transformative experience to me in a lot of ways, in the way that I relate to the outdoors, because I wasn't much of an angler before I started Tenkara, and Tenkara has really forced me into a much more intimate relationship with biology and geology and hydrology and entomobugology.
All the ologies.
Yeah, so like many ologies. It's been very logical. But
yeah, I mean, I'll add that just to kind of toss it in there, and it kind of riffs off of what Anthony said. I think at the end of his comments is the thing that I value the most of this that came out of Tenkara and being 15 years is basically like 15 years of friendships with people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. I had fished Tenkara for about 3 years, solo, like in this weird little world where we talk online, but you just fish by yourself, right? And I think was it 2012 that they had the summit, Tenkara USA had the summit in Utah?
Salt Lake City? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was the first one that I actually went to and actually met other Tenkara people. Anthony, you were one of them, but Chris Stewart was there and Jason Class and a lot of the people that are, still kind of in and around Tenkara, and there was people that came from Japan for that too. Like they were guests and they did speaking and all that stuff. And it was just like a total introduction that hey, these people are cool. And a lot of them became friends for the last 10, 12, 13 years since. So, I definitely owe a lot of that to Tenkara. And I thank Tenkara USA and Daniel for, kind of putting that. The Tenkara guides, they were involved in that too. I mean, there was a lot of people.
Yeah.
You could just keep on going. How many people? It's funny. If I look at my social media accounts, right, and you friend people, I probably have more friends that are Tenkara people than they are people that I went to high school with, or it's just the way it kind of evolved. So I think that's kind of.
Yeah, I just want to add to what you guys are saying that I think Matt made me think of it is and all of this is made possible because Daniel, it was total accident. Do you guys know the story? So he went to Japan. I'm not sure why he was there, but he was into fly fishing and he thought, well, there must be some cool Japanese fly fishing gear. And he sort of just started looking for Western fly fishing gear, but in Japan, and then just stumbled across Tenkara in that way. So it's just total serendipity that he found it, and then that he decided to leave his job and start a company. It's kind of crazy. When you can't write that stuff. It's a story that it's kind of hard to believe, that it happened the way it did. So
yeah, I'm glad he did. And, the butterfly effect from there, has definitely, touched all us, which is super cool. So congrats to Tenkara USA and honestly, anybody that fishes Tenkara. I mean, the 15 years is a big thing, and happy to acknowledge that on the podcast. I'll kind of jump into a couple other things just real quick. A couple other things going on with some of our brands, some of them being partners of ours. So I thought it would be worth mentioning. Dragon Tail Tenkara, they mentioned that they have a new rod in the works that is, I guess, codenamed the Talon Mini 245. It's a smaller version. It's an 8-foot version of the Talon Mini they put out earlier this year. And they were actually soliciting names for it because I guess he doesn't want to call it the Talon Mini so they don't get confused. The two rods don't get confused in a couple Facebook groups. So I was just wondering, if you guys thought up any names or had contributed any names to that.
I voted for one of the names.
What was the name?
Partially because of Anthony's supplementary comment, but Little Smoky I thought was both clever and, kind of tying into the Appalachians. And also, as Anthony pointed out, if they all come with a little tin of little smoky sausages.
That wasn't me. I don't want to take credit for that.
Delicious.
That was someone else. Just
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, my bad.
Maybe it was Rick. I'm not sure who it was. I don't want to take credit for that, though.
Props to whoever included the smoky sausages into the little smokies. Whoever said that.
My suggestion was tokage, which is lizard in Japanese. So with dragon tail things, how a lizard is, a little dragon.
Sure, I gotcha.
Yeah, that was cool. I thought the name tokage, it kind of meshes with their other rod names nicely with the K sounds and whatnot. So,
yeah, sure.
I like it.
What the Japanese word for salamander is, because then there's an animal that goes in water.
Right.
Yeah. I did look it up, but I don't remember what it is. Yeah, let's see.
There's a lizard in Laos where I work. Water monitors is this particular type of lizard. I don't know if they occur in Japan, but there may be a Japanese word for this water monitor lizard.
Yeah, they've got the giant Japanese lizard or salamanders that are like 5 feet long. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, if we figure it out, we'll put it in the comments of the podcast or edit it in. But I like those ideas. I didn't come up with one because I'm not imaginative. I would have told him just to keep Talon Mini and keep the line going. But I understand why he didn't want to. And if anybody does have any suggestions, I think he posted it in the Appalachian Tenkara Anglers Facebook, maybe the American Tenkara Anglers too. I'm not 100% sure, but you can probably scroll back a week or two's worth of posts and find that. And if you want to suggest one, I'm sure you'd be able to. Next up is just an interesting sale. One of our affiliates, Zen Tenkara, is closing out one of their rods. It's one of their small rods. It's the Hachi. And it's a rod that they normally sell for $200. I think they're selling it for $80 right now. So, if you're in the market for a rod or as a backup or as a primary even, whatever, $80 is kind of unheard of for Tenkara rods. So,
I got the chance to use the Hachi recently. I took it out of my little brook trout streams here. And one thing, it is exquisitely beautiful. The craftsmanship on it is really fine. So, I caught half a dozen brook trout in the morning on this little tiny rod, my little tiny brook trout stream, but it's exquisitely made. The craftsmanship, it's beautiful. And I think for $80, the quality of the workmanship, it's a steal.
Yeah, absolutely. So if that's interesting to anybody, any of our listeners, I'm pretty sure they're still on the site as of today, but I know they're closing it out. So, definitely head over to Zen Tenkara and check that out. We'll put the links in the description of this video if you want to check out that closeout opportunity. And then last but not least, as far as brands go, there's been some rumblings that Luang Tanuki, Tenkara Tanuki, as you guys all probably know him, he does a boot camp every year in California. And I guess, Amanda Hoffner on the Tenkara Angler team has been helping him out with that, at least for the past 2 years. And they have been mentioning that they want to do an East Coast boot camp, probably in North Carolina or Tennessee or something like that, in 2025. So no real details on that, but I know there's a lot of, as Amanda calls them, Tanuki heads, kind of like deadheads, but, fond of Luang out there. If there's any Tanuki heads on the East Coast, it sounds like there's going to be a boot camp in 2025. So stay tuned. I'm sure we'll get the information and post it in the event section of Tenkara Angler when the time comes. And just to kind of close out, speaking of North Carolina, Tennessee, obviously the last time that we've had a podcast, the area, some of the area has gone through some significant damage from flooding from Hurricane Helene. And one of the things that we've been noticing, I've just been hearing it on social and whatnot, is that, a lot of people have, and for all the right reason, been staying away from that area to let, the affected regions recover. But a lot of the folks that did get hit, a lot of the communities that didn't get hit quite so hard and, depend on, tourism to get by, are really crying out for people to come visit, come fish. So, the Southeast is one of the places where it's still, for as far as weather goes, it's still, agreeable. And, I just wanted to kind of put the commercial out that there's a lot of towns that are trout towns in Western North Carolina and, Eastern Tennessee, like Townsend, Bryson City, places like that are open for business. So if you're looking to squeeze one of those last kind of fall trout trips in, let's be sure to try to, support one of those areas, if possible. I'm sure they'd welcome the hospitality. I know a lot of us, have frequent those areas and, really want them to recover quickly. So I just thought I'd kind of throw that in there. Obviously, if you are going to go, make sure you call ahead and, make sure that, if you're working out of a fly shop, that they're open and taking customers and all that sort of thing. But, don't stay away. They need the support there. So, that was kind of, I guess, what I had for, current events. Is there anything else that anybody wanted to add or hit on before we play the overrated, underrated game? All right, cool. Bill, are you familiar with the overrated, underrated game?
I am not.
Okay. So what this is, and I have not prepped anybody on these topics, but I mention a topic or an item or a thing, that's related to Tenkara in some way. And then we just kind of go around the horn and you say if you think that thing is overrated or underrated and why. So I'll kick it off. I'll throw it to Anthony first because you're who I see, to my immediate left on the screen. The first one, and I bring this up because I actually just read an article on, I don't remember if it was like Fly Lords or Midcurrent or one of those websites, but it is barbless hooks. What are your thoughts on barbless hooks, overrated or underrated?
Yeah, I saw that article too, and I have to admit I didn't read it. I just looked at the blurb, and I made a decision based on that, whether or not to read it. And I'm going to say barbless hooks. I mean, I don't have my finger on the pulse of America, but I'm going to say underrated, and this is unrelated in a way to fish, but I like to wear flannel shirts a lot, and if I get a barbed hook in my flannel shirt when I'm fishing, it's hard to get out, and it snags, and it can ruin it. I've ruined shirts that way. So likewise, if you get it in your finger, or heaven forbid, you've driven 2 hours past, the last town in Maine, and you've gone down these logging roads to a cabin with no electricity, and then you've hiked 2 miles to this lake where they have canoes stashed, and you're fly fishing with your wife from a canoe, and a hook somehow gets in her head. If it's a barbless hook, it's a much better scenario, so
that sounds suspiciously specific.
It's just a hype, it didn't happen, but it could have, it did happen actually. But so barbless hooks, yeah. And I don't know what the article said, Mike. So, in my experience, I mean, I get barbless hooks out pretty easy from the fish. Seem to be way easier than a barb hook. And if I lose fish, who cares? I don't care.
Sure.
So I would say they're underrated.
Underrated. All right, Bill, what about you?
It depends on the context. In Switzerland, where I fish, barbed hooks are illegal, or it's barbless, basically nationwide. And what I've noticed, and I've talked about this with Chris Stewart a bit, sometimes I see no difference in my netting efficiency, landing fish between barbless and barbed, and sometimes I do. So I carry both in the driftless area because, I'm a catch and eat guy. I rarely go trout fishing, and I don't bring a few trout home because I really live off the land here, hunting, fishing, gardening, foraging. But if I realize that I'm going to be catching quite a few fish and really looking for a nice one to keep, I will often start with barbless hooks just because it is hard to rip. It's harder to rip the hook out of a barbless one. I do realize if I do get back into Western fly fishing, I really need to go barbless because I was on the West Fork of the Kickapoo a few years ago. I was into Tenkara, but I was also into Western fly fishing and also trying to learn that better. I hadn't done much since I was a kid. And man, I was on the West Fork of the Kickapoo, casting a hopper, and my form wasn't too great. And I back cast the hopper right into my eyebrow and it hooked in my eye. And I'm trying to get it out. It's a barbed hook. It's not coming out. So I managed to cut the line off. And I'm driving back into Verwokra with this hopper. It was a Dave's hopper up in my eyebrow. And there's these two fishermen parked along the road that I'd ran into earlier. And I got out and I said, could one of you guys help me with this? And they said, no, go into the fly shop in Viroqua and, they'll driftless angler. They'll help you. So I went in there and it was great. I went in and I, like Arnold Schwarzenegger going into like the police station in Terminator, I went in with my sunglasses on. And it wasn't Matt at the counter. It was another woman who worked for him. She said, can I help you? I said, no, I think can you help me? And I took my sunglasses off and there's this big hopper in my eyebrow. There are like 2 or 3 other guys in the shop. And she said, well, all you can do. And they said, look, you just got to, just tough it up and just push it back, the way it came in. And I said, well, could one of you do this for me? It's easier if somebody else does it. And none of them would do it. So I went into the bathroom in the driftless angler. And I looked in the mirror and I reached my tolerance of pain. And that wasn't coming. Fortunately, Viroqua Urgent Care was right across the street. And I went across and they could take me in. And there was a very nice doctor from India, Dr. Patel. He hadn't been here long. And he says, what's the problem? And I said, hey, this. And he goes, oh, I've never seen this before. I said, okay, well, and he just did what somebody else could have done. He just put a little, painkiller in there, and then he cut the barb off and pulled it out. But so I don't know if that makes barbless hooks. I'll call them overrated for me. All
right.
I don't like them. No, I would say for me, I'm neutral because I use them in context and other times I don't use them. So,
okay, cool. Matt, what about you?
I'm going to say underrated. And while I agree with both what Anthony and Bill pointed out as far as kind of like ease on the fish and ease on potential equipment or self-injuries. I guess I'm just going to be selfish and self-centered and say that I like to get part of the joy of my experience is a smoothly conducted release. So, barbless hooks allow me to do that a lot better. And so, like, I'm always looking for what I would consider to be a complete circle, complete circuit of, identify a likely spot and cast and work the fly and catch and all the way in and then all the way back out. And those really facilitate those best.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And just to, I guess, maybe pull the thread through, the gist of the actual article that I was referencing, it's funny. It didn't mention personal injury at all as a factor. It was really referencing fish mortality. I guess there was a study that was done that I guess proved that, or showed in their results that there really wasn't much of a difference between barbless and barbed hooks when it comes to fish mortality. Now, that doesn't take into account handling or anything of that. I could imagine you got a barbed hook and you're struggling to get it out of the fish's, mouth. I mean, that probably isn't the best for fish mortality. So I don't really know what the metrics were that they, totally used, but that was the context of the article. And I don't think it was even mentioned once about getting it in your eyebrow or in your wife's head or anything like that.
And, I realized, Mike, coming to think about it too, and I hadn't really conceptualized this till now. When I'm fishing with barbless hooks, I have to be a bit more of a skillful fisherman, especially if I'm using like a beadless barbed hook, because if I relax tension for a second or two, often, that hook will fall out. And with a barbless hook, that ain't going to be, I can be more sloppy kind of in my fishing and landing with a barbless hook than I can with a barbless hook. So I realize I have to be a little bit more of a skillful finesse fisherman using barbless hooks. You got to keep constant tension,
right?
Especially with a bead head, or that thing can slip out. So that's, I think that's an argument for using it. I become a more skillful fisherman.
Does that change your answer? Overrated or underrated?
Still neutral.
All right, still neutral. I like it. All right, we'll go to the next one. So this one's interesting, I think, because there's always been a debate on whether Tenkara belongs here or not. But I'll ask you if you guys think it's overrated or underrated. Fly fishing only designated water. Matt, I'll start with you on this one.
Well, I would say underrated, and I believe that fly fishing only administrated water would include Tenkara, and I think that there's some good reasons to split up some water, not all, but some, kind of by some different styles of fishing. If just for the way that they might coexist on the water at the same time, like say like a spin fisherman and a Tenkara fisherman are going to be absolutely working the terrain and the larger geographic piece in different ways, So, and the same with any sort of fly fisherman, I think, versus like a spoon or a bait spin fisherman. So I could see some utility in that. But generally, so like my caveat, my asterisk here, is my anarchist side. No rules for nobody, baby.
I like it. So you are, even despite all that, you are sticking with underrated, right? That was what you said?
I'll say, underrated because I think from and I think from a management perspective too, because I would venture to say that you would manage, like say the fisheries over in Iowa that are put and take fisheries, are a lot better suited for spinners,
Sure.
And spoons and stuff like that. Just in the way that they're managed, I think. So, yeah, I can see some utility in applying some different management styles to different pieces of water.
Got it. All right, cool. Bill, what do you think? Overrated or underrated?
Okay, I am absolutely in a disagree with Matt on this one. The only thing I've ever disagreed with Matt on. We both love past lakes. We both love. So you're talking about the concept of fly fishing only waters, restricted to fly fishing only, which would include
Correct.
Tenkara.
Yeah, just in general, not whether Tenkara belongs on them or not, but just
Okay.
their existence. Yeah.
So I'm just going to clear. I have fished out west. It's not my part of the world. I'm going to speak from the context of Wisconsin and the driftless area. Vastly overrated. For one thing, we've got 3,000 to 4,000 to 5,000 wild breeding brown trout per mile in these streams. A lot of the streams, the fish are stunted. And I would encourage people, if they're interested in this topic, this guy, Tim Traver, wrote a very interesting book, was published several years ago, Lost in the Driftless, The Cultural Divide in Trout Fishing in Wisconsin. And he gives the history of how many local fishermen have given up or been driven out of fishing in Wisconsin because the regulations have gotten far too complex, much more complex than they need to be. Our Wisconsin trout regulations 20 years ago was like they still are in Iowa. It was like half a page. They're 38 pages now with utterly no management reason for doing this. Like, Timber Coulee Creek in Wisconsin, it's catch and release only. And Rob Worthing fished it. I was at the, driftless workout, and he didn't know anything about this. He just said they need to be taking more trout out of there. All the trout are stunted in that stream. There is no reason from a management perspective for a place like Timber Coulee with 3,000 or 4,000 trout per mile to be catch and release only or flies only. And I think it's a very elitist thing. I think it discriminates against local fishermen who want to fish with worms or spin casting. And certainly in the driftless, there's enough trout to support anybody who wants to do that. I don't see any streams that are worms only or spin casting only.
Very true.
I don't like it at all. I'm very clear on this one.
All right. Overrated it is. What do you think, Anthony?
I'm going to say power to the people. I'm going to say it's overrated. I guess I would love to know, the historical context in which these areas were developed. I'd be curious to know about that. Do you know what I mean? I can see, if you look at pictures of like Fisherman's Paradise in the State College area in the 50s, where there's hundreds of people lined up to fit. It was the first catch and take, fishery, but you don't see those crowds, anymore. Like in Pennsylvania, Mike, I don't know if you can attest to this, like it's almost become like a 1-day trout season, like opening day, and then there's nobody out, so I guess historically maybe there's some context where like just the physical act of fly fishing was difficult because of the crowds. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? So, but I don't see that anymore. And yeah, I feel like, I mean, if there is a conservation aspect to it, then, barbless hooks, or like I could see maybe in Pennsylvania, we have delayed harvest artificial lures only areas where you can't use bait, but you can use any artificial lures. And that kind of makes sense to me, I guess, because I feel that's not as like you talked about, Bill, as elitist. It's pretty wide open. You could use whatever you want. So, but I don't know if the science backs that up or not, the trout mortality. But, and some of them, a lot of the delayed harvest ones, the idea is that the fish are in fairly marginal streams, and after a certain date, you can harvest them.
Right.
So the idea is to try to keep them alive for a while. People get to enjoy it, and then, it's a delayed harvest. So I don't know. I'd say overrated just because I do feel like if I were a spin fisherman, I'd be like, well, why can't I fish there? It doesn't make any sense, like I'm letting fish go as well, Spring Creek is where I fish a lot, is catch and release, all tackle. And it has one of the highest trout populations in the state. You very rarely see anyone doing anything but fly fishing. There is the one section where you can only fly fish, but anywhere else you can do whatever you want. And it's rare to see anyone fishing any other way anyway. But it has lots of fish, and there's no limit on how you can fish for them. So I would say overrated. And I mean, I guess, but the caveat is as a scientifically minded person, I would love to see, the basis and the reasoning and the data, but in general, my gut is overrated.
Certainly. All right, so 2 overrateds and an underrated. I don't have a strong opinion. I think I kind of agree with like all you guys, like from the standpoint of less rules, probably the better. Honestly, I think there should be, I don't even know if this exists. I know that does in some places, like in terms of seasons, but I think there should be like youth waters and then maybe like senior waters on the other side. Just to like, because well, you know what I mean? Like sometimes it's difficult for people to go out and fish, they just, especially if you have low mobility or something like that, like, to then be fighting over other anglers or something like that. I think I know they do that, at least in Pennsylvania, there was always like that youth fishing weekend or whatever like that. I think those sorts of things are good, but I guess I'm kind of against it myself. I guess I would say overrated too. All right. So the last one I have, we'll take this one super quick. We don't really need actual explanations. But what I would like to do is have the first person answer, and then the other two just say overrated or underrated based on their answer. Okay? And we're recording this right before Halloween. We're recording this on the 30th of October. So my question for you, Bill, I'll start with you. I don't think I went with you first. What's your favorite Halloween candy?
Candy corn. That's just tradition I grew up with.
Matt, Anthony, thoughts on candy corn?
I mean, I don't.
It's a classic.
It is a classic. I will eat candy corn,
classic, but
because I'm a human garbage disposal. But it's not something that I would be like, I think, hyped up over.
Well, I'm not either. It's crap, but it's a classic. So
are both of you saying overrated then? Although I don't know that it's rated very high to begin with.
Even if it's even wherever it's rated, it's still still too high.
Matt, what's your Halloween candy?
Reese's peanut butter cups are like, anything peanut butter and chocolate's good, but Reese's peanut butter cups are hard to beat. Although I have to say that there's something to the ratio of chocolate and peanut butter that makes the Reese's peanut butter egg
better than the cup.
At Easter. Yeah, it's better. It's science. Don't ask me to quote it, but there's something just correct in the ratio of chocolate and peanut butter in that one.
Hass Lake of Reese products, right, Matt?
Yes,
excellent.
Absolutely.
So I would guess by the exuberant thumbs up, and everybody would probably say it's an underrated. Although it's almost the opposite of candy corn, right? Like Reese's is at the top. It's hard to underrate it, but everybody kind of seems to like that. What about you, Anthony? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and this is not a national thing, Clark Bar. Does anyone know what a Clark
Bar
is? Yeah, Clark Bar, and if you can't find that, a Butterfinger, which is a similar thing. So those would be, Clark Bar or Butterfinger.
Cool. Any thoughts on that, Matt? Bill? Any of those?
For decades. They must not make them out here anymore. But yeah, I love Butterfingers too.
Is the Clark Bar just made of nuts?
No, it's kind of like a Butterfinger. I mean, it's got that flaky, I don't know what you call that.
Yeah,
like a Butterfinger.
I love Butterfingers.
Yeah, it's in the same family.
Don't lay a finger on my Butterfinger, as was once said. But I guess I'll have to try a Clark Bar now.
Yeah, if you can get them. I know it was one of those companies that went out of business. It's a Pittsburgh company originally. Went out of business, and then I think like whoever's buying up all those old candy brands, bought them too.
Interesting. Well, I would have said Reese's Pumpkin myself. I would have gone that route. But since you went Reese's Cup already, I'm just going to throw a little ad in there. If you haven't tried them, M&M's makes these not peanut M&M's, but peanut butter M&M's.
Yeah.
That are phenomenal, and I think they're better than like Reese's Pieces at the end of the day, which was kind of the same sort of thing, but I like the M&M version better, so I'll toss that one out there. We had a couple bags of those go through our house, and they didn't really last very long. So,
and being from Wisconsin, please don't forget your cheese curds at Halloween. That's what we love.
That's right.
For cheese curds,
I love it. I love it. Well, that will conclude our overrated and underrated segment. I appreciate you guys playing along there. So now I guess I'm going to kick it over to you, Anthony. You wanted to kind of lead a little bit of a conversation on Tenkara lines.
Yeah, I'm looking at the time here, so we're kind of getting close to our hour.
We can make it supersized, just like those Reese's cups. Keep on going, man.
Let's go for it.
So the reason I bring it up is there was a comment on our the Tenkara draft episode we did. George Spence 590, not to be confused with George Spence 589, said that he didn't know that there were so many other kinds of lines. We talked about lines a little bit in the draft. We had to pick one, right? So he said he wasn't aware that there were so many other kinds of lines. He said as an amateur. So it just made me realize that it's hard as someone that's been doing something for a while to remember that there's constantly new people coming into the hobby or into the thing. And you see a lot of, I'm on guitar forums and stuff, and you see people attacking newbies all the time with their questions and stuff. So just to kind of, respect new anglers, and I hope that some new people will listen to us, because I always feel like anything I write or say is directed at newer anglers. Like people that have been doing it for a while, they find their own thing, and they find their own way. So with the newer anglers in mind, I wanted to address that a little bit and talk about what kind of Tenkara lines there are, what kinds you guys like to use, and then how you kind of like to rig, line, tippet, fly, like the knots you like to use, that kind of thing. Since we are getting a little low on time, I won't overdo it too much. But so what kind of lines are there? So in general, I would break them down into multi-filament lines and monofilament lines, and then fly line style lines, that being with a core and an outer layer, right? So there's kind of like three major types. So for the you three, are you guys, give me a thumbs up if you're mostly like a level line angler. Level line? Yeah. So for anyone who's new to Tenkara, when someone says level line, right, this is the kind of stuff you're talking about. It's generally fluorocarbon, which is denser than nylon. So if you're new to the game and you think you're just going to go out and buy some nylon monofilament fishing line, it's not going to be the same as a Tenkara line. It's not going to be as dense, so it will be a little harder to cast. The other thing is, in general, the colors of the, especially like the Oni line, this Nishin Oni line, or the PALS, is it's quite opaque. so it's a lot easier to see. A lot of like nylon, say you get some gold strand or whatever, it's usually pretty clear. It's a little harder to see. So if you got a traditional Tenkara line, it's made for Tenkara fluorocarbon, that's sort of, I don't know, call it the standard, but I'd say it's very popular, right? There's all different colors. I like orange. I would suggest if you're new to Tenkara, try out some different colors like pink, yellow, whatever, and see what fits, what you can see best where you fish. It might be different for you. For me, my eyes and where I fish, I like the orange. What do you guys, any preferences on colors you guys have?
I don't have a preference on color.
I found pink is visible to me in the widest variety of light conditions.
One thing I tried, because, I came up from the like Matt Smet, Rob Worthing, Oni, stealth thing. For a while, I was using green line because sometimes, my casts aren't perfect and sometimes the line falls on the water or I want to put it on the water to make a longer cast. And I just thought, in the driftless area, there's often a lot of grass growing over the streams. I thought maybe it's less alarming to the fish. They just see a bit of green on the water. It looks like grass. Possibly it would alarm them less than orange or pink on the water. I have no idea. But for a while, I was using green lines for that purpose. But now I have gone back a bit more to orange and pink just for the better visibility.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to like, when you're looking at a color for a level line, it comes down to like, obviously clear would be very stealthy, but it's very hard to fish with because you can't see it. So yeah, it's like a balance. I do think under certain conditions, maybe the brighter colors spook fish, but I think under those conditions, when you've got low clear water, bright skies, it's the shadow. Honestly, I think it's the shadow more than anything. I could be wrong, but I spook fish. I've spooked fish fishing with clear tapered fly leaders, because of the shadow. So anyway, so that's kind of fluorocarbon level line. Now, level line can come in other forms. This stuff is kind of hard to get here, but it's a Japanese nylon line. It's made for, if I can dig up where I got it, Mike, I'll give you the links if you want to buy it. You're going to have to go to a Japanese website to get it though. But it's nice because these are nylon lines, but they're bright and fairly opaque. So there's the orange one and this one's a green one. So if you can find a nylon line that's nice and bright, the advantage to some nylon lines, even though they're lighter, if you're nymphing, I like to use them when I'm nymphing because they can be more supple and strike detection can be a little bit better. But, when I used to try to get this Japanese stuff, but now because Euro nymphing's become so popular, there are lots of monofilaments that you can get in nice colors. So my favorite is this tricolor Cortland. It has a black section, then a green section, then a black one, then a pink one. So and then yellow. So with those different colors in the black, you can really see movement. It's nice and supple. For strike detection, you can get it in different line weights. This is like a 8-pound, which would be equivalent to like a 1.5 Japanese Tenkara line, something like that. So if you're looking for something, especially if you're using weighted nymphs and the line castability isn't as much of an issue, this stuff is nice. And the nice thing is you can get it at any fly shop. Like Tenkara lines, you're gonna be stuck ordering them for the most part. But if you're looking for something that's high vis, you can't get a Tenkara line, you can't get one in time, you can try this stuff. It's good. You can get it at most fly shops. This I would get higher than 8-pound though, maybe like a 12-pound one, if that's what you're interested in. You can go. You were talking about like you can go to clear lines. This is this bite marker line that you can get. It's kind of clear, but it's got some color to it. It's hard to see. It's the same thing. It's got a couple different color variations. I know some people, especially if you're fishing, like I talked to Jonathan and Tunez, if you're fishing downstream, and you're swinging wet flies where strike detection isn't as crucial because you'll know when you get a fish, but the fish are really spooky. Yeah, going to like just getting a clear fluorocarbon line could be nice. And I would look for like I don't think I have the box here, but if you're looking at fluorocarbon lines, look for one that's really supple. The Tatsu line is one. It's one I didn't have here, so I'll have to find a link for that. But it's a much more supple fluorocarbon than a lot that you find. You just don't want something that's too stiff. It's harder to fish with. It's not as fun to fish with.
Anthony, can we loop back a little bit and touch on the fundamentals here, and like what are the advantages and disadvantages of this line choice versus a floating or a furled line?
I think it's very popular in Tenkara, right? Because either if you're fishing the nylon or fluorocarbon one, you can keep your line of appropriate length off of the water. You can keep it off of the water.
Because this is the most lightweight line choice of the three, correct?
Yes, very lightweight. You keep your line off the water. It's very stealthy, even in high-vis colors. I mean, if the line hits the water, it's not making a big splash. You're not, it's very stealthy. So yeah, of any of the lines you choose, this level line is going to be the stealthiest in whatever color you choose. I don't know if anyone wants to add any pros and cons to that.
No, I'd agree with that. The only thing that I would say is if you're casting an unweighted fly, it's probably one of the more difficult ones to cast when you're new. The other lines being a little bit heavier are intrinsically easier to cast. So when I started fishing Tenkara, I used a furled line, which I will probably get into next, for basically the first 4 years. For no specific reason. It's just what I used. And I didn't really pick up on level lines until, I don't know, maybe 2013 or 14. So
interesting. So one last thing I wanted to add with the level lines, the one that I've been using a lot lately is this 1.5. This isn't actually a Tenkara line. You can get it from Dragon Tail. It's opaque. It looks much like the Oni lines, but you can get it in a 1.5, a very small diameter. So I really like that. But the thing I like to do is I get the, from George Daniel, I learned about the solid paint markers. I talked about them in a video once. So they're just like it's kind of like almost like a crayon, but you can apply to the line. And when I'm using those, I like to apply some black stripes here and there. And what that allows you to do is just see movement a little better. With the solid color line, sometimes you can't see the movement as well, especially if there's glare on the water and you can't look at the line water interface as well, and you're forced to look up the line a little bit. If you've got some stripes on the line or one of these multicolor sighters, you can see that movement that a lot more than with the solid color. So especially if you're not fishing with action. Now, if you're fishing and you're using a lot of action on your fly, it may not be an issue because you're going to feel fish, So
lots of options with monofilament lines, it seems like. And if you're buying Tenkara lines, just because we didn't mention this, they usually come in a numerical number. The lower the number being the lighter, the heavier, the bigger the number being the thicker or the heavier. I think most people's sweet spot is around 3 to 3.5, especially when you're first starting. And then people usually work down from there. So that's right. a great, like if you want to give level lines a try and you've never done them before, maybe go try find a number 3 level line in a color that you think would work good on the background you fish on. And that would be a great place to start.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Mike. Yeah. A 3.5, a 3 in that range. And then also with different rods will react differently. So if you have a rod and you're not loving it with the 3, I mean, you might try a 4 or a 2.5. So it doesn't seem like when you're looking at these lines and the difference between a 2.5 and a 3.5 doesn't look like much, but on certain rods it makes a difference. So it's like I guess a preface to this whole line discussion. It's like a guitar. So I play guitar badly, and there's like this balance between strings, string height, pickup height, neck, the adjustment of your neck, all these things to try to get it to be just like you want it to be, right? So each guitar is going to want different strings, different string heights, different pickup heights. And it's kind of like that. So just, so if you have a rod, I guess short story is try different level lines and then try some of those other lines we're talking about. And you might find that same rod that you didn't like with one line, you'll love with another line. Don't throw it out just because you don't like it right away.
I agree. And specifically to put this in Tenkara fishing terms, experiment with the length of the line, experiment with the length of the tippet. There's a lot of variables in there that'll help you fine tune your cast and your equipment to you.
Yeah, totally. And one last thing I think we'll probably add on level lines before we move on to the next type is, as you noticed, Anthony was pulling up spools. You can make the line, you can cut it to whatever length you want it to be, right? Whereas some of the other lines that we're going to talk about are pre-manufactured at a specific length. So you're somewhat limited there. You could always add more tippet to them, but you're going to buy a 12-foot line or a 13-foot line or a 10-foot line. This you could make a 20-foot line if you wanted to, as long as you had that much on the spool.
That's a huge advantage. Thanks for bringing it up.
And on that note, I do want to tack on one other potential disadvantage in that this type of line has the most line memory of any of the line choices that you can make. So, yeah, it can get if you're super lazy like I am and wrap it around the handle of your Tenkara rod, you're gonna have to straighten out some kinks before you get to fishing.
Yeah, so
it's not a big deal, but it's just something to be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, so we might as well talk about that since you bring it up, Matt. The level line, a huge advantage is that you can make it any length you want. So often I'll start out, if I don't know what I want, I'll start out longer than I think I need, and I'll trim it down as I need to do. And you can take the whole spool with you and obviously cut a new line off of it. Like a spool, this is 20 meters, so you can make a bunch of lines out of it. So it's fairly cost effective too. The other advantage is pretty cheap per line when you look at it.
Most Tenkara rods are 3.5 meters. So it gives you, you're going to get 6 or 7 lines out of a spool of that size.
So there's a lot of advantages to it. Matt was talking about the memory. So what you have to do is, say you have it, you can see this has got a curl. You pull it, the whole length of it, and that'll straighten it out pretty quickly.
I mean, like you guys have seen me get ready to fish. It doesn't take like any sort of huge operation to get the line ready to go or anything.
But it's a good point to do that. And I know some people will I don't know if it was Oni. Someone was talking about it. They'll have a friend hold the end of it and they'll just stretch the whole line. But you can kind of do it in sections. And you don't have to it's not like the old-fashioned leader straighteners, if anyone remembers those, like this rubber and you pull the line through it. You don't have to do that. You just need to pull it and it'll straighten out pretty quick. It'll straighten out on its own eventually, but it's nice to straighten it. So that's kind of level lines. If you guys have anything else to add.
Yeah,
okay.
Let's go to the next type.
Sounds good.
All right, so the next type of line that you might hear people talk about are furled lines, and I think this term is used a little bit erroneously. Some of the lines they call furled lines are maybe multi-filament twisted lines and not traditionally furled lines. But basically, a furled line or a twisted line is going to be a line made of multiple filaments, kind of like imagine a piece of rope, and it's twisted together. A furled line generally has a taper worked into it and is made of often like fly tying thread. So it's a very soft, let me find an example. It's a very soft, limp kind of line with like Matt talked about, with no memory. And often they're tapered. And like Mike alluded to earlier, furled lines, because of they have higher mass and because they're tapered, they're very easy to cast. So if you're new to Tenkara, you put a furled line on and you go to cast, and they practically cast themselves. They're very easy to cast. Whenever my dad resisted Tenkara for many, many years, and he went out with me recently, and I wasn't going to give him a level line to start with. I gave him a furled line that he could cast really easily, and he found that perfectly enjoyable. So furled lines I'm not really going to get into all the different kinds of furled lines, but if you go to a vendor like Dragon Tail, who probably has, and you guys may know better than I do, but I think Dragon Tail probably has the biggest selection of furled lines that you're going to find anywhere. You're going to find all different lengths. Like Mike said, you have to pick the length you want ahead of time. I'm looking at the back of this package. It says 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. You get all different lengths. Dragon Tail makes them in different tapers for different applications. This one is it's the Odachi. It's a powerful sink tip line. The Shogun is a multi-purpose line. So if you go to the Dragon Tail website and you read the descriptions, it'll tell you what the lines are. So the advantages of these furled lines is they're super easy to cast. Disadvantages are that they're fixed length. You can't buy a spool and make it whatever length you want. You got to order the size you want. So on the stream, you're not going to be able to trim it back. You're stuck with what you have. And then a lot of folks would say a big disadvantage is that you're going to be stuck fishing with the line on the water more, or fishing a shorter line that you can keep off of the water between the rod and the water surface. So it's not as flexible and as stealthy a system as.
And this is because it's heavier than the level line.
One other disadvantage of furled lines, at least for beginning fishermen, and I remember when I was, a lot of back casts into trees. And when you pull the furled line free from the tree and it stretches a bit, it balls up when it finally pulls free. The level line doesn't do that. It can be a little bit. I agree. It's much easier to cast for a beginner, but it does kind of ball up and tangle when you pull it out of a tree.
Very trapped.
Yeah. So
It can.
So the thing that you have to be careful. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the thing that can happen, it's hard to make it happen, but what happens is it twists all up on itself because it's a furled line, so it's already twisted upon itself. And so when you pull it and that tippet breaks, it comes back and could be. But the trick to teasing it out is so if that happens to you, if you've been fishing with furled lines or you haven't been fishing and you get a snag, you pull it out, your line looks like a bird's nest. You shake it out. You just shake it, and you don't want to start pulling stuff. You shake it, and it'll kind of all shake out. If you start pulling it and stuff, then you could end up with a huge mess. But generally, if you shake it out, you can get it to all go back to normal.
It was interesting when I was in Austria recently. A lot of the Austrian guys are using furled lines, not level lines. Seems to be quite popular. Or even guys like Bernard, who's been doing Tenkara for more years. Because I kind of had like maybe a lot of its evolution was I started out with my first Tenkara USA Sato. I think I started with furled lines because they were so easy to cast. I didn't know how to cast, but I could cast that. And then kind of as I became sort of more expert, then I was going to level lines and then finer and final level lines. And then at the Wisconsin Driftless Tenkara gig this spring, I was talking to Brent Auger of Dragon Tail. He just mentioned he uses furled lines quite a bit for different uses. He prefers them in strong wind, heavier flies. And so when I realized what I've started doing, I like that Odachi with that sinking tip that Anthony pointed. It's a clear sinking tip because when I'm fishing in, for example, Switzerland, a lot of the water's shallow, but then you get these really deep plunge pools, and there's like trout down there, 15 feet on the bottom. And I carry another rod rigged up with that Odachi sinking tip and a tungsten bead. Like I love Egan's Red Dart or Pink Squirrel, and then I use that to get it down there. And then when I'm on the next stretch of stream where it's quite shallow, I just put that rod away in my pack. I prefer to switch rod back and forth and switch lines. I keep one line and one fly and one rod, and I carry 2 to 3 rods with me whenever I'm fishing. Yeah, I like it. So what's happened is I went from furled line to just straight level line fisherman, and now I'm getting back into furled lines for different specific uses. It's kind of been my...
It's a great call. Maybe the one last thing that I'll add on this before we go to the next line is that I use furled lines. I live in Florida, so I do a lot of like pond, warm water fishing just because it's local. And I actually use furled lines for that. So if there's any warm water, Tenkara or fixed line anglers out there, a furled line is great because it will eventually like kind of get waterlogged and it will sink. And especially if you're going to throw like a heavier fly, it's a heavier line. So it actually casts the fly a little bit better. When you're using a very light level line and you have a heavy fly, it's more like a lob. It's not a graceful cast. Doing that, when I fish for bass or anything like that, especially if I'm going to use a mini streamer or whatnot, I use a furled line and kind of twitch it under the water. I let it sink and twitch it. And it's a great setup for that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just something to be aware of in general, is that the furled line will change characteristics as you fish it, unless it's somehow 100% waterproofed. But so you have to be aware of those performance changes, and take those into account as you're fishing it. And the other thing to be aware of, and like one reason why I kind of moved away from them for my heavy line choice, is that they will freeze. If you're fishing, sub freezing temperatures, they will freeze up on you. And in that case, there's a better choice, in my opinion, but that's what we're about to talk about next, I think.
Before we move on from multi-filament lines, I just want to bring up these Fuji, these Nishin Pales lines. These are my favorite. They come in fluorocarbon or nylon. They're not a furled line. They're more of a twisted line, so there's many fewer filaments than a traditional furled line, and they're generally clear. They're a little stiffer, not as supple as a traditionally like thread furled line, but they're like lighter, and they generally don't soak up water the way a thread furled line does. You can apply a little bit of floatant to them if you want. But generally they're not like a thread line that's going to soak up a lot of water. So they don't have that aspect, but they're super light. They cast themselves. A lot of furled lines you can cast them without a line really, but these you're going to have to go to like Tenkara USA or Platt to get them. But I think if you've been using furled lines and you want something that's lighter, then what you've been using, you might want to try these. I just think they're fantastic. You can kind of make them on your own. I know some people have. If anyone's interested in it, I can make a video about it. But anyway, so I would add these if you're really looking, if you like furled lines, you like tapered furled lines, but you want something a little lighter and something different. I really like these Japanese ones. I
could put that in the notes with the podcast. That would be great.
So moving on, we kind of have one major type of line left, and there's two kinds of lines left, really, actually. It's complicated. There's more than that, but there's still two. There's actually three kinds I have sitting here, but all right. So the next major type, I think maybe Matt's thinking of is like a fly line style line made from fly line. Is that what you're thinking about, Matt?
Yes, a floating PVC fly line.
Yeah. So if you go to, different Tenkara vendors, you're going to find these floating lines that they make, which are different vendors of different styles. So basically, imagine like if you're a fly fisherman, it's a core, either a monofilament core or a braided core with PVC coating, like a traditional fly line. You can get them in tapered versions or in level versions. These are, super easy to cast. If you get a heavier one, it's great for larger flies, streamers, that kind of thing. They're great for if you're fishing lakes and you're fishing poppers, things that float. These floating lines are great because if you have a line that's sinking and you go to work your poppers, it's not so great. You want a line that's floating, So here's an example. This is actually the Daiwa one. So it's not. Some people might think this isn't traditionally Japanese, but Daiwa actually makes a floating PVC Tenkara line that you can get from Daiwa. So it's certainly a Japanese thing as well. You can get them from, I'm sure Dragon Tail has them, and Tanuki has them.
So as far as advantages go, we're looking at having increased mass to throw larger payloads. We're looking at being able to float. Disadvantages go, this is going to be the heaviest line choice. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I would probably agree. What's going to happen is that when you try to keep the line off the water, if you want to try to do a drag-free drift or a manipulation or whatever, the weight of the line is going to pull it back towards you.
Correct.
Whenever you have a line that's, generally this heavy, whether it's this or a furled line, you kind of get the same sort of reaction, which if you're trying to get a drag-free drift can be viewed as a negative.
Now, this I would say, as I alluded to as we were closing up that last segment there, this would be my recommend for a Sub-Zero line choice. I'm personally not a big Furled Line fan. I fished them for a year or two back in my early days, but then the knots got the best of me. I didn't have the patience that Anthony has with them. So when I want a heavier line choice, I go to a floating line, and that's for streamers or anything larger. But yeah, other than the weight, I can't think of any huge disadvantages.
Yeah.
Other than to say that they're not 100% floating all the time.
Yeah. And don't discount them just for dry fly fishing, like straight up dry fly fishing, right? You put a long tippet on the end, a long clear tippet, and you fish it just like a Western fly rod would.
Right.
And
Western
it's perfect
style.
for that. Yep.
It is. Yep. And so you can buy them or you can make them yourselves. I like to make them from Cortland Monocore Euro line. It's a level line. You can make them pretty cheap. You get like 90 feet of it for $40 or something. So you can make a ton of different lengths. It's super light. It's probably lighter than some furled lines once they have water on them, the Monocore ones. Or like I talked about with Mike Lutz when we did I did my little podcast with him. He would just buy, a 1 weight, 2 weight line, and cut off the section and use that. So you can make them yourselves too. And nowadays it's so cheap. If you go to Amazon, you can find really cheap fly. No sense in buying an expensive fly line to do this. You can buy really cheap ones, cut them up, and make your own lines really easily. So it's very DIY if you want to, and it's pretty inexpensive. Like Mike said, for Western style fishing, I use them when I'm fishing shallow water edges, because I can fish tiny nymphs on the edges, and I'm if I try to keep the line off the water, I'm going to pull those flies to me, and I just want to fish the drop. So if you're interested in fishing Western style, it's a really good choice. The purists may not like it, but people in Japan use them too, so it's not completely out of the ordinary.
They do, and I'm forgetting if it was. I'm forgetting the name, but there was a Tenkara master, like a recognized Tenkara master who fishes floating line.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last kind of line we could talk about briefly are there are tapered monofilament lines. So if you're familiar with Western fly fishing, think about like a tapered leader, but generally thicker than that. This is a Fujino one, so it's a opaque sort of orange color, but it is a monofilament line, but it is tapered. So you kind of get somewhere in between. You get something that's a little bit lighter and easier to keep off the water, but a little easier to cast. So it's kind of a mid. It's probably the kind of line I use the least, because for me, I don't know where it sits, but I know that a lot of people like them. They come in, some different colors and some different stiffnesses, but some people really like them. So the Fujino tapered monofilament leaders is something you can try. If you're looking for something in between, like a level line and a furled line. This here is a nylon tapered line for those that really want to get into the weeds. It's from Daiwa. It's sort of a transparent yellow color, so it's not the easiest line in the world to see. You're going to have to get it from a Japanese website. Tenkara USA, I think, has them. I can see it's kind of a yellow color. This line is 7 meters, so it's a 7-meter line, and it is tapered. It has a 4-meter level section, and then a tapered section, tapering down at the end to like a number 2 level line. But anyway, so they're harder. They're pretty tough to cast, but the delivery is very light. Yeah, so they're and if you want to go down the rabbit hole, it's kind of another kind of line. Again, if anyone's using them and is like loving them, and let me know what rods they're using these on and how they're casting them. I found them pretty difficult personally, but
I'm only aware of people using them at long lengths as casting practice lengths. It's the type of that I want to say maybe even an 8-meter version of that I've seen Oni casting. But yeah, I've never seen anyone actually fish with that stuff. So that's really like these are two good, I guess, annexes. But I guess the three lines you're going to encounter are going to be the level line, the furled, and the floating. I guess
lots of options, and you really can't go wrong. I would recommend picking up. One the good thing about Tenkara lines is they are relatively inexpensive. So as you can see, Anthony owns one of. I think he went through 100 lines tonight, so he's got one of all of them. So just try them out, and like we said, your rod, you might not find the right one for your rod, but they're relatively inexpensive. So if furled isn't for you and you want to try level, or level isn't for you and you want to try floating, there's tons of options. So highly recommend anybody, if you have any questions, reach out through either the comments of this video, send us an email through the website. We'd be happy to help you pick a line that fits the rod that you want to fish and the style that you want to fish as well, because there's tons of options out there.
Right. Yeah. And the last word would be, definitely don't, you might be convinced that good Tenkara anglers only use level line, but don't let that sway you. Try a bunch of different stuff out and see what you like, because it's all about having fun. If you're not enjoying casting a level line, maybe that's something you work to, but try some other lines out.
It's just important to be out fishing, right? Well, cool. We went over a bunch of line options, and like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. I'm sure we'll be able to answer. Maybe we should even turn this into a blog post sometime. I think it might be beneficial for just general reference material as well. So
awesome. Experts, I know there's going to be the well actually people. Please comment. If you've got some actually.
I guess before we close out the podcast real quick, I did want to toss in a few Tenkara angler related commercials, just super quick. The first one is, when we brought Anthony on, we brought him on because he's part artist, and we asked him, to put together a logo for the podcast, which he did. And it's on a shirt that I think both he and I are wearing tonight. I've got one on. There we go. And he's got one on. So it's a very cool retro design, kind of 80s inspired, Anthony.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we've got that available on if you go to our shop on Tenkara Angler, you can pick up a t-shirt, a hoodie, I don't know, all kinds of stuff, kind of print on demand through our Spreadshirt shop. And then did you put it on Amazon too?
It's on Amazon. Personally, I'd go to I think Spreadshirt has much better shirt choices, like a lot more choices and better choices, and it's a little easier to navigate. Like I found on Amazon, I found it difficult to find the designs in one place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So if you're looking at them, Spreadshirt I thought was easier to navigate, and I like the shirts they had way better. There's other products, mugs and all that kind of crap too. But
so check that out if that's of interest. If you want to show your level line podcast pride, I guess.
Tag us on, and we get.
Yeah, we'd love to see pictures of it in the wild. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Pictures in the wild. Tag us on the socials.
Cool. And then two other things, just super quick. We put out a post about a month ago that we are going to do a 2025 print magazine, and basically the call for submission period is open now through November 29th. So if you had a really cool adventure that you want to write about, or maybe a cool picture that you took and you want to have it in the upcoming print issue of Tenkara Angler magazine, we do a print issue every year. We're not just a website. Get those, package them up, and either send them in through the form on the website, or you can email us at staff, STAFF, at tenkaraangler.com, and we'll take Word documents, photo attachments, however you want to send it in. We'll make it easy for you, and if we need anything else from you before we put it in the magazine, we'll certainly let you know. And then one last thing is we're going to do an art contest. I'm not going to reveal the subject today, although we did actually talk about the subject briefly, I think in the beginning of the podcast. But we're going to have an art. We're going to have a fun art contest where we'll probably end up giving away a rod or something like that to the winner. I don't know how we're going to choose the winner, but we'll determine that. So look for that in upcoming weeks as well. I think it'll be fun, and I think you all get a kick out of what the theme is once you see what it is. So keep your eyes peeled to Tenkara Angler. Definitely like, subscribe, all those things. If you subscribe to our blog, you'll get an email when we announce that. So I think that's pretty much it for tonight, guys. We did a supersized podcast tonight. We're about an hour and a half in. So unless there's anything else you want to add, I just wanted to thank you all for joining us tonight.
So I would add, we moved to a different recording platform. And I'm just curious, people who have watched it on YouTube, the old one versus the new one. I think you'll be able to see all of us on this one, Mike. Is that
we could?
Yeah.
We'll see how the editing goes. I've never edited one of these before, so we'll see.
If there's any comments on this newer platform versus the old one, I'd love to hear what people think.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys, and thanks everybody for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.